Hey everybody, Josh here with Online ADA, bringing you another video from the WCAG Accessibility Guidelines. In this video, we're covering 3.1.1, Language of the Page. This is a single A level requirement. Let me jump into the description here. It's a short one. The default human language of each web page can be programmatically determined. That's it. This is actually a fairly simple rule, and it's very easy to comply with. All we have to do is on our HTML element, the tag, which is typically the very first tag in our document, we simply have to add one attribute and optionally a second one for backwards compatibility. I'll touch on that in a second. That attribute is going to be lang, L-A-N-G. The value of that attribute is going to be a 2-digit country code. For instance, the most common one being English, from where I'm from, would just be EN. So lang equals EN. That goes on the HTML tag. Done. The document is now identified as English language. Now you can also provide a secondary optional subcode that can go along with it. It's denoted by the EN dash, or hyphen, and then a 2-digit subcode character. This is important because it can identify variances in the primary language, such as British English versus American English. There are 2 different codes for that, for instance. Now, there is quite a lot of different character codes that you can use, language codes, I should say. There are lists online that you can find. It's important, though, that we're identifying the core language of the page at the very beginning for a number of reasons. I personally do not know the Braille language myself, but the documentation tells us that identifying the language of the page allows Braille translators to substitute out control codes for accented characters. Additionally, it can insert codes necessary to prevent erroneous creation of grade 2 Braille contractions. So for those users who are using Braille translators, this is going to be huge for them, very important. Also, a lot of speech synthesizers on the web, which is where the browser will read back to you with a synthesized voice, they take a lot of cues from what language we have identified the page as. So this will also help them with pronunciations and getting more accurately the word, because if you're identifying the page as English but you have a Spanish word on the page, it probably will sound like, it'll just butcher it most of the time, because it doesn't understand that Spanish. But if you switch the language over to Spanish, that's actually a second subset of this article, which is identifying languages of the parts. And I'll get into that more later, but in another video. But this one says, just in the document itself, if you can identify that we're on English, then it'll read with the English language, and it'll understand those words better. Also, marking the language can assist user agents in providing definitions using a dictionary. So a couple of really important pieces there, and that's going to help for people who have difficulty understanding the content as a whole. It helps them not have to put in as much effort to try to understand all the content. They can just get it that much easier. So also people with short-term memory loss, things like that. We're going to have a whole lot more opportunity to present the content to them accurately if it's in the correct language and identified as such. I did mention that I was going to touch on a backwards compatibility portion of this as well, and that is in older websites, sometimes they were served up in a language called XHTML. This is not as common anymore, but there are still a lot of sites around that do this. They serve up XHTML in a way that presents it as just regular HTML. And in those cases, to achieve backwards compatibility along with that LANG attribute, you can also apply an XML colon LANG attribute. And they take the same country codes and subcodes as well. That just identifies it for those XHTML pages as well. So having both of those attributes on your HTML tag, which is the very first element on the page, is going to go a long ways towards getting you compliant. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.